every 15 minutes, something new was happening with the Connecticut Sun this offseason. So having Jen Rizzotti here to talk all about, I mean, slight exaggeration, is a real thrill. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hi, everyone, and happy Tuesday to you. My name is Howard Megdal, and I'm delighted to be your first listen every day with Locked On Women's Basketball. Over 300,000 of you have showed up already in February alone. We are on track to break our record for most listens in a month, and of course, February is a short month. So thank you. It is not just me, of course, it is the entire team over at The Next, where we have over 100 reported pieces every single month on the past, present, and future of women's basketball. Go ahead and sign up. $9 a month, $72 a year. They all get delivered to your inbox. You get to hear and see and read all of it at thenexthoops.com. And again, we've had no shortage of off-season coverage in general, but the Connecticut Sun have done a particularly good job of keeping us busy. And Jen Rizzotti, Connecticut Sun president, is here to talk all about it. Jen, I just the place I want to start before we get into the arc, the shape of it, and not just who's gone, but who's coming in, which is really compelling to me. Is for you, has this been the craziest offseason that you can remember?
Well, yes, for me, yes. I've been here. I'm almost 4 years into my time here with the Connecticut Sun. And, we had a roster that was very consistent for a long time, right? So I will admit that like we were prepared for this. This didn't catch us by surprise. We knew this would be a busy off season. It's something that Morgan and I talked about a couple years ago when, we hired Darius and we kind of started to groom her to take over as the GM. We talked about this, potentially being her first off season officially as a GM, and making sure that we were prepared with our own strategic vision as to what we were trying to accomplish during this time.
There are some newcomers to the women's basketball world, so I'm going to take a second. I can't go through your entire resume because we only have a half hour, so we can't actually do that. But Jen, when you think about the things you have done, the things you are doing, your championships at every level as a player, your ABL years, you can go on and on about it. The biggest thing to me, what was so amazing, is that you're running an organization at the same time that you are winning an honor 3-on-3 coach of the year in 2024 by USA Basketball. And I just wonder, so many different muscles you're exercising. Is there one that's more enjoyable than the other? How do you sort of strike that balance psychologically, mentally?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I think the diversity in what I'm doing is what is keeping me mentally engaged and mentally challenged. Obviously, I gave up a 20+ year coaching career to take this role. It was a big pivot for me in my career, one that I wasn't sure how I would feel about. And I ended up loving what I'm doing. But being able to coach 3x3, and I also coach my son's 17U boys basketball AAU team with Rebecca Lobo.
Yeah.
It kind of scratches that coaching itch for me, right? It's not something that's full time. There's not this similar like stress level year round, but it allows me to stay connected to the game. And I think part of what I've learned through this role is that like leadership and relationships transfer in whatever you're doing. And so going from a player to a coach to now a front office executive, I've taken all those lessons I've learned about, player relationships, people relationships, how to treat people, how to lead people, how to motivate people. And I've turned that into a career, right? And it's something that I'm really proud of. And to be named coach of the year usually means that you have good players. And so I've been very fortunate and blessed to be able to coach great players through my career as well.
I want to talk Sun, but I just have to ask, what is the division of labor like with you and Rebecca? Is it guards and bigs?
Oh,
Is it, how do you
no.
navigate
It's like, oh, Jen, maybe you could come help us out to, oh, here's the clipboard, by the way, you're the head coach. So she makes me do everything. I do all the practices and she yells at the refs on the sideline while I'm coaching. So it's quite a dynamic, but it's a lot of fun, and it's allowed her and I to reconnect with our families in a way that has been really special. And like I said, it keeps me connected to the game, and allows me to really enjoy the basketball world that I live in with my son.
Such a cool thing. I'm really glad you get to do that. So let's talk about the Sun and the changes. And again, before the offseason came, there was an obvious, there's a conversation around this that it felt like a bit of an obvious end point to
Yeah.
be making changes. So kind of as you thought about this, and to set this sort of framing for our listeners, it's an end point, it's a change point, but it's at a time in the league where everything is temporary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything's on this one, everyone's, but I think 2 players at the moment are on a 1-year contract. So
Mhm.
take me through the way in which you thought about how the 25 teams should look within that context.
Yeah. There's a lot of thought that went into it. When I took this job in April of 21, and Kurt Miller was still the coach here.
Yeah.
And we were talking then about what the length of our championship window looked like, right? And we were looking to re-sign Jonquel. She agreed to come back and for one more year to give it a run. Last year, we were in the same situation. We had Alyssa and Brianna under contract for one more year. We were asking DeWanda to come back and give it one more run. So we've known now for 3 years that we've extended this championship window probably a lot longer than people would have expected us to. And so we were making decisions in 23 and 24 to win now. Like that was it. Like we're going to win now. So making that trade midseason last year for Marina was a win now trade, right? It was a decision in that moment that we had this window. It was closing. We knew Dewana, Alyssa, and Breezy were coming off of contract, and we had to make decisions to win now. And so, I think at the end of the day, we tried to look at this off season as we knew that window was closing. Let's open up a new window and a new door and think about retooling the roster in a way for the future. And I think every team in the league right now is either in a win now mentality or they're in a build for the future mentality. And you can still be competitive and retool your roster creatively to win without completely rebuilding. And I think Morgan and Darius, our priority was to retool without completely rebuilding and making sure we had good pieces to build around for the future.
Some of what you're saying seems to come down to the fact that there's more talent in this league than there are teams to be able to be filled, even with the Golden State Valkyries coming in.
Yes.
That this is effectively, 144 is not 144, as we know, with all the 11 team rosters. And so even 156 will not be 156, and it'll be closer to 150. So from that perspective, before we get into the international element of your build, which is significant from the head coach on down, but was there this thought as well that here's a chance to almost have a 1-year, a pause is the wrong word for it, but a pause that allows the fans who show up at Mohegan Sun to be entertained and competitive even within that.
Yes. And I think that, the key is that this is a more than a 1-year process. And I don't know that everybody's looking at it that way. Like we're far from the only team that had players request to be traded, right? When you look around the league, there's a lot of big stars that ask to be traded from their current team to go try something new, but nobody's, signed, as you said, beyond this summer. And so for us going into the off season, we needed to be open to making some changes. We knew players were going to be wanting to leave. We had some of our non-negotiables in terms of, who we didn't want to move. And we were open to moving pieces on our roster in order to put ourselves in a position that we wouldn't be completely retooling a roster in 26. And so I don't know that everybody's looking at the big picture here, that this is a strategy. You give up a piece that's likely going to leave at the end of 25 in order to get a draft pick and a piece that's going to be under contract in 26. Like that's a strategic move for the program to keep us competitive, but also an eye to the future. And so, I think a lot of GMs have different strategies right now, but there are a few of us that are thinking long-term here about, hey, we had our window. We were good for a long time. Every good team goes through this moment. Connecticut has gone through this moment, right? After the Mike Tebow days, right before Kurt's teams were really good, we had these moments where we had to think, re-envision our roster. And so I feel like Morgan has stayed true to our priorities in this offseason as our GM. She's been firm in, what we think is fair in terms of trade value. And we've really had some fun thinking about, some of these pieces we signed and what we think that they could mean for the 25 season and beyond.
Again, and we're going to get to break, but just the luxury of having a player under contract, especially, by the
Yeah.
way, under
Yes.
contract under the previous rookie scale.
Yes.
Someone like a JC Sheldon, who's been on the show, who has a lot of talent to bring to the table. It's an incredibly difficult thing to find right now, simply because there are not free agents who are signing long term. There are nobody is doing so, and so that feels like almost the greatest natural resource in WNBA offseason right now. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it's a really important point. We're going to get into more of the players who are coming in, more of the conversation with Jen Rizzotti. I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by DoorDash. DoorDash has, right now, they swoosh, you save. And they do it for, they're called NBA fans. Now, I understand the NBA is the National Basketball Association. It's a chance for men to play basketball professionally. Jen, have you heard of this? Have you heard of the NBA?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Yeah. No, and again,
here and there.
We're all in for women's basketball here, obviously, but how I always say it to my wife, to my children, is that the NBA is a perfectly fine way to pass the time between women's basketball games.
Yes.
And so you can do that with DoorDash right now, where if any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 2024-25 NBA regular season, for us to understand, for an NBA player to do what Michaela Blake does pretty routinely. So if that happens in the NBA, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Again, an NBA player has a Michaela Blake's, and you end up getting the chance to save. The offer is valid from 9 a.m. Pacific time through 11:59 p.m. Pacific time after a 50-point performance in any game during the NBA season on orders placed at participant merchant locations, valid only in the United States. Maximum value of discount is $10. Discount applies to subtotal only. Does not apply to fees, taxes, and gratuity. Use promo code NBA50 to redeem, and you must have an active Dash Pass account. Make sure you're taking advantage of this DoorDash. And yeah, the NBA, I don't know, maybe people cover it. I'm not sure. I'm sure you can find out. There got to be box scores somewhere. New Jersey's own Michaela Blake. Back here with Jen Rizzotti here in segment 2, talking about the players coming in. And again, I wrote about this a few weeks ago in the 9, but it really struck me that the opportunity to bring in Tina Charles, to have the opportunity to see her shine the way she did, and Morgan Tuck, to her credit, pointed this out. This is not just a veteran move, somebody to come in to mentor people. Tina is playing at an incredibly high level still. Can you just kind of take me through, leave where she went to college out of it? I think the UConn program has had a little success, but just for you as a basketball head to see Tina perform on a day in, day out basis, what that's going to be like for you.
I'm excited about it. I've had some opportunity to coach Tina through USA Basketball National Team years, and just her preparation and her mindset and her IQ around the game. When you couple that with what she's able to do physically, it's just super impressive. And I think like the great thing about Tina is, as you said, is she's still playing some of her best basketball. And it wasn't a sign that necessarily made sense for us when we had the most loaded front court in the WNBA with Alyssa and Breezy, and at the time, John Quell here. But this makes such sense for us to do right now in this moment, because she's somebody we can build around. She's somebody we can throw the ball to and know that can score at a high level. She's someone that can mentor and be a good voice in the locker room. And so she's someone that we can count on to put up good numbers every single night. And I think that was what we needed. But I think most importantly, it's a chance to bring a legend back to Connecticut. not just a legend in the WNBA, but a legend in Connecticut Sun history. Somebody who was setting records here, got drafted here and was setting records here and almost led the Connecticut Sun to their first ever WNBA championship. So we just felt really proud to be involved in that free agency discussion and be able to give Tina that opportunity to come back here, but also to be able to honor her in the later parts of her career and hopefully let her, finish her career in a Sun uniform and do it in the ways that she wants to. And that's to continue to be dominant, but also to create a lasting impact on this game.
I had a privilege to not only cover her at UConn, but during her quote unquote peak years in Connecticut early and with the Liberty as well. And so to see her back getting that level of appreciation is something that just feels appropriate to me. The numbers she put up as a passer in a Liberty offense that did not have a lot of obviously number one scorers outside of Tina. I think speaks to the kind of player she is, and seeing that will be exciting. It's by no means, of course, the only new big time player, and Natasha Cloud coming over in trade as well. It feels like an opportunity for Tosh to show some things that I know she was eager to show when she left DC for Phoenix. And if you can kind of take me through sort of what those conversations have been like just initially and the way you see her fitting in.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that was a priority for us when trading a player like Alyssa Thomas, right, was to make sure that we got a lot of value in that trade back. And I thought Phoenix was very fair in what they offered us in value. And that's appreciated because not everybody's willing to do that when they know a player is looking to move on, right? And so, when you looked at Phoenix's roster and the pieces that they had, Tosh was somebody we felt like had to be in that conversation because of the value that she brings to the team, to teams that she's played on in terms of her, leadership, the fact that she's a two-way player and she's a coveted point guard in this league because she can do things that a lot of players can't. And it's not a position that has been that there's a lot of really, really good players, competing at this level and this time. And so, again, we're talking about losing our front court that's been a mainstay for us. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to fill our roster with some youth, some potential picks for the future, but also some veterans that would be able to kind of hold down the fort and make sure that we're moving in the right direction as we enter into this new phase of Connecticut Sun history here.
You have somebody like Natasha Cloud, somebody like Tina Charles, bringing in also Diamond DeShields. Again, these all feel like value upside plays, even though you're talking about veterans, right? You're talking about players who, Natasha has always talked about wanting to find a way to be more of a scorer, and she'll presumably be asked to do more scoring there. Somebody like Diamond DeShields, look, you and I both remember what Diamond was, an absolute star of stars and has been through things nobody should have to go through physically in her time in the WNBA. Does Diamond feel like somebody who, first of all, where is she health-wise? And second of all, like, is she somebody who is sort of central to the way you think about this team goes about being competitive this year?
Absolutely. Diamond's doing great health-wise. Diamond's another one. I was her first USA basketball coach when she was 15 years old, playing on the U19 World Championship team. So her and I go way back. She probably did not like me very much as a coach when she was 15. But what I will say that I was always impressed about Diamond is her understanding of the game. And I think people look at Diamond as such a physical specimen. Like, she's so athletic, she's capable, she has all this potential. Nobody really understands how important the mind piece is to her game. And she's had her health issues, right? And I think the fact that, like, she's healthy and she's looking for an opportunity to kind of reset her identity in this league made her a good fit for us, because yes, we want good young players, but this league is really hard and really competitive to win. And so we wanted to make sure we were balancing that out with players that understood what it took to compete at the highest level. Diamond's obviously been a part of championship teams. She's had her ups and downs, and we're excited to give her a chance to be, to come back into this league healthy and show people what she's really capable of.
It's something that, again, it comes back to players getting opportunities to show what they can do. I do also just want to talk, and we definitely won't get to everyone because there's so many that you have brought in. But Abby Shue is somebody who has been on my radar,
Yeah.
watching her at Columbia, the opportunity she's had, obviously, to play internationally as well. Can you just take me through what you think she can be and whether she has an opportunity to help this team, not just again with her overall defensive game, but specifically her shooting, I feel like is a real separator in terms of her as a prospect.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. These kids coming out of college don't realize how much making the WNBA is about opportunity,
Yeah.
right? So when we drafted Abby last year, we didn't have an opportunity for her to make our roster. So we didn't bring her to camp, and we told her that, like, this is not a year where we have a roster spot for you to compete for. But next year, again, we knew this was coming. That's going to be your chance. And so go play overseas. She had a chance to play a little bit of 3x3 with USA basketball for the America Cup. Hone in on the skills that you need to improve on, have a little bit of pro taste, and then come back and compete in a camp where you actually have a shot. And so I think when you couple the fact that we have more of an open roster this year, we have a new coach that's very offensive minded, that's going to only help Abby, in her journey to make a WNBA team. And so we're excited about it. We drafted her for a reason. We knew what her skill set was. We knew what her story was. We've always been known to be the team that's got like a chip on their shoulder. So as we're going through the roster, think about like all these players that have a little bit of a reason to show out, a reason to play with maybe a little bit of chip on their shoulders, right? Because they want to prove, whether it's individually or for our organization, what they're capable of. Abby kind of fits that mold. So we're excited to invite her this year and give her that shot.
I have said it on the show before. I will say it again. She's going to be a WNBA contributor, just a
Okay,
matter
that's
of time.
good.
So I'm mark it down.
Yeah.
We will be back in segment 3 with Jen Rizzotti talking. We're going to get into some of the Marina Mabrey conversation. We're going to talk just bigger picture about what 25 can be as a building block for the roster, for the franchise going forward. I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. But first, and we're back here in segment 3, Howard Megdal, Locked On Women's Basketball, talking to Jen Rizzotti. And just want to talk about the Marina Mabrey thing, because I feel like the way in which you described the Alyssa Thomas conversation really sort of speaks to it, which is that all over the league, there are players who are looking to make changes for one reason or another. Some of these trade requests are honored. Some of these trade requests are not. They're trade requests. They're not trade demands. And so I just wonder how much it comes down to for you thinking about, look, here's a trade request that we're going to make and we're going to honor today. And it goes both ways, because you understand that another team could be in a similar situation tomorrow. And it is, obviously this is competitive, but it's also cooperative, right? It is that balance, no?
It is. And it's not always easy. And people have no idea what the full story is, right? When these things are happening behind the scenes. And sometimes they become public for whatever reason. And other times they don't, right? You said that. Some are honored and some are not. I think in the case of Alyssa, she was an 11-year veteran that played her entire career here. This is a conversation we had last year, about it potentially being her last year in Connecticut. And she had given us everything. Like she had poured her, entire blood, sweat, and tears into helping us win a championship. So that conversation's a little different, right? I can remember last year in the middle of the year when we were trading for Marina, I said to Morgan, this is why I can't be a GM. Cause like I'm a people person. Like this is hard for me. Like Marina is a terrific player. It was 100% worth trading for her for a ton of reasons. But when people ask me about like what we had to give up, they think I'm talking about our draft picks. And I will be honest with you, I actually cried when we had to give up Rachel Banham and Mariah Jefferson. Like, we're talking about two of the best humans in this league.
Two of the best humans in this world.
And yes, they weren't the guards at that moment that were going to help us win a championship. And so trading them away was the right decision for the basketball side. No doubt. But I said, I can't do this as in this role because I'm heartbroken. I don't even know them that well, but I know they're great people. And so when you give up two great people, you give up a draft pick, it's because you know that that person you're trading for is worth it. And we feel like Marina was worth it, right? She was worth it bringing in last year. We felt like she was the piece that we needed to get over the hump. It didn't work out for whatever reasons, not because of Marina, but because it wasn't our time. But we felt like that was a good investment for us to make, with bringing her to Connecticut, and we've invested in her, not just financially, but like we've both, with her contract and off-season marketing agreement that we have with her that's ongoing right now, and time that our trainers have put in with her, and making her kind of the face of our future. And so, these things happen in all of professional sports, that players change their minds, but we felt like we had to do what was best for the organization and all the moves that we've made. And so, keeping Marina for another season was something we felt like was a priority for us and something that we were going to make happen. And so it speaks to the value that we put in her and what we think she's capable of. It speaks to the fact that we hired a coach that wants to make her a focal point of our offense in a way that maybe she wasn't last year, right? So I think it's going to end up being a real big positive, and I think we're going to make this work, and we're not worried about it, no matter what's happening publicly. I think that Marina's a baller. I think she's competitive. It's the reason that we wanted her here, and I think she's going to have a great individual summer. And then, whatever happens in the future going forward, that will be hopefully a private discussion between Morgan and Marina as we kind of move through the next phase of Connecticut free agency.
You need a New Jersey talent
I
on your
know.
team, so
Yes.
that alone is significant. But again, she's always had two-way all-star talent, and certainly we've seen it throughout professional sports. I feel like we've seen it less often in the WNBA until the most recent collective bargaining agreement, which has unleashed these kinds of off seasons that are fascinating. But I've never seen an off season like this. I don't think in any professional league ever. Just know it, with this CBA coming and with the money coming in from the new media rights deal, it feels like we're on the cusp of something enormous. And so I do want to end with this point. I've always taken particular exception to a thing you said when you were inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. I wrote it down so I would have it here. It would say, I'm in the Hall of Fame because I played at the right school at the right time with the right teammates, and I was taught to be a champion by the best coach who's ever coached the game. This is to take nothing away from the people who have surrounded you, but what you have accomplished in this game is not just enormous, but it has a breadth of time that is significant, that needed to be honored and was rightly honored. And so people need to understand how much you've poured into this to understand what this moment has to mean for you.
Yeah.
Can you just take me to a point in time, a moment, a thing you've seen over the course of the last year when we've seen this explosion that we always knew was in the offing and is finally here, that particularly touched you emotionally?
Oh God, one thing.
You don't have to limit to one.
I honestly, the day that the players found out about the charter, chartering the season, it's really kind of hard to describe. Like, it was like no one believed it was real, right? Like, and I can remember Dewana saying, like, I never thought that this would happen in my playing career. Like, it meant so much to a player like her, and I'm like, well, you can't even imagine what I had to deal with, right? We were traveling and playing the day of the game. We were doubled up in hotel rooms. We were making considerably less back in the late 90s when I played. But to have kind of that full circle moment, to know those of us that were there in the beginning in 2003, the height of popularity of the WNBA, right? Like, when you compare viewership numbers in 24 to the next highest year, it was 2003, which was also the year I retired. So it's probably why everybody stopped watching,
That's right.
But, you think about that full circle moment where a player who's been, poured in her whole entire career to making the league better, to like the look on her face to be like, I never thought that this would happen in my time. Right. And knowing how many women went before Dewana and went before all these players now to pave the way for this moment to be here. And I feel like we're all on the same page in terms of knowing that it's deserved. And it's like, finally people are paying attention, and finally this investment is being made in this game in a way that's so important for the future of the league. And I'm just really excited that I've had a career where I've been able to impact that at every level, whether it's as a player and bringing popularity to the game when I played at UConn, to being a coach and hopefully impacting positively, hundreds of lives through my coaching career, to now being a front office executive where I'm opening doors for women to continue to break ceilings and break glass ceilings, and to pave the way for the next generation, not just of players and coaches, but of front office executives. It just makes me really proud to know that I've been given this opportunity, and I take this responsibility very seriously. And that's why these interactions that people want to talk about on social media, like, I take them personally. Like, whether we trade somebody or whether we don't, like, it matters to me for a lot of different reasons. There's so many layers, because we want to treat people right. We want to create a great experience. We want to celebrate the history and the investment that our owners have put in to Connecticut Sun players for over 2 decades, right? And then we also want to challenge and push and celebrate the fact that there's going to be an even higher investment level in the future. And it just makes me really excited that I get to be right in the middle of it, and I get to help lead that charge in a lot of different ways.
Without a doubt, no one more deserving to be able to do it. Jen Rizzotti, I really appreciate your time. We've got to have you back, because there's always more to talk about.
Okay.
And
Sounds
delighted that you're here. And to our listeners, I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. We will, of course, be back with you tomorrow, as well as we are 6 days a week. Until then, I'm Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Tuesday.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.